Hello, welcome back to What If Pirate King Luffy Went Back in Time. Sadly, this is the last part of the series. If you have any other ideas for fanfics, please comment them below. Next one is what if Luffy was trained by Rayleigh early? At sea for weeks. Weeks and weeks. Probably. The food was nearly gone, at least. And all he'd found was water, water, and more water. And he didn't have a map, not that it'd help. He couldn't read maps. Whose stupid idea was this, anyway? He caught a flash of movement from the corner of his eye. In less than a second, his arm had stretched and rocketed into the ocean, grasping the fish like some overpowered fishing claw. He reeled in, crushing the life out of the fish as he pulled. He winced. Constantly shoving his arm in the water was starting to get to him. So with one hand, he cut apart the little fish while letting the other arm lounge about, the sun slowly evaporating its coating of water. Delta popped the mostly rescaled fish in his mouth, swallowing noisily. Raw fish not as good as Sanji's cooking, but he took what he could get. If one doesn't puke, the taste is fine. Such is the life of a poor, extremely powerful soul, lost at sea in the East Blue of all places. He'd made jokes of the kind before, but he really didn't want to die in East Blue, if only because Gold D. Roger had done it first. And Delta was no copier. The news coup flew overhead. "Oi!" Delta yelled, waving his hand. "Over here." Newspapers usually bored the crap out of him, but hey, desperate times. The little white bird took a nosedive, easing off perfectly to land on the boat. In its claw, the paper. Delta reached out to grab it, only to be swiped at by a claw. "Right," Delta muttered. "Payment." He tapped his chin. "Bird, I don't have any money." The crew ready to take off. Wait. Let me finish, I don't have any money, but come on, you gotta be hungry, right? How about I give you a fish right now? No one needs to know. The crew, though easing its position, stared at Delta neutrally. "Okay, I see. You're a tough one." Delta lifted his hands for dramatic effect. "Two fish." Its stare screamed bird annoyance. "Red fish, blue fish. Wait, how about 3? 4, no 5. It was interested, he could tell. "Yeah, think about it, 5 whole fish, right now, for just 1 measly paper. You like that? It straightened its wings, finally nodding slightly. Delta grinned. He activated his observation hockey, directing it toward the water, and picked out the 5 closest decently sized fish. His arm stretched, much to the surprise of the crew. "This is gonna hurt," he muttered to himself. And he fired, snatching the 5 fish in a powerful strike by the way that only a pirate king could. And as he dropped the fish to his feet, panting in hidden agony, he swore the news crew would have clapped had it had hands. It tossed him the paper, scooped up the fish in its sack, and flew away. Delta stared at the neatly tied news. His head dipped. He just bribed a bird. He really needed to get out of this ocean. 00000. Bore. What a waste of time. Newspapers sucked. Stupid stuff like Morgan takes over as head of news and Water 7, Pirate Haven. Lame. Guess it's not really news if it's in the past. He almost didn't even turn to the last page. Luckily, his ocean boredom outweighed his newspaper boredom. And right there, waiting to be seen, was the childhood photo of Nico Robin. Devil child Nico Robin spotted in East Blue. The breath caught in Delta's throat. He couldn't take his eyes off the photo, even to read the article. Sure, it was her as a child, but it was Robin. This was the first time he'd seen any sort of anything about his old crewmate since, well, when was he not in the past? It had been so long. And he hadn't so much forgotten what they looked like, but little things, like which eyes Oro had cut or what type of brown Chopper's fur was, they were simply a wispy memory of a before time with no value in his current reality. They, for all intents and purposes, weren't real anymore. Poof. Didn't exist. But here was Robin the archaeologist. Chaz by the world government, friend to none, sole translator of the Poneglyphs, and she was real. In East Blue. Delta laughed, and the laughter turned to tears because he had to remember now everything he'd lost since coming back here, all the people who'd never met him, and the crew he would never willingly leave behind. He missed them. It didn't matter if it had been years, they were his crew, and he'd never forget. He read the article. The final touches of red were about done fading from his eyes when he looked up. She was on Mango Island. He didn't know where Mango Island was, but he would find if it was the last thing he'd do. He tucked the remaining food he had on the boat into a little sack he brought with and pulled it over his back. A determined gleam refused to dull as he shot into the air, boat cracking with the force of the air pressure. With speed he hadn't attempted in years, Delta soared through the air at jet-like speed, refusing to stop until he found an island. Lo and behold, with the distance he was covering in so little time, it didn't take long. He paused, looking down at the patch of land. Not enormous, but there was a pretty sizable town down there. Surely someone could direct him. Delta dropped from the air a little out from the town's range. Wouldn't do to make such a freaky first impression. As he walked through the town, something seemed noticeably off. Namely, there weren't any people to inhabit it. And yes, they were actually there, he could sense them all with his observation, but the fact that all of them sat locked away in their homes felt wrong. Of course, he'd seen this before. Either the Marines were stationed here, or there were pirates. He was surprised he hadn't noticed the presence of either of them when he landed, but of course he was in a weird state of mind at the time. 9 minutes ago. Maybe he was still in that state. Meh, it'd be fine. He walked into what looked to be a restaurant, what with the chairs and tables and whatnot, but with a distinct lack of people. Well, at least a mustachioed bartender was still there, afoot the room, behind one long table. Not that Delta drank much, but bartenders always seemed to know what was what, and info was currently his main priority. The bartender had frozen at Delta's arrival, staring with nervous tension, polished glass in hand. "Hello," Delta said. "You're not too busy, are you? I'm in need of some help." "Who are you?" the man asked rather neutrally, all things considered. "Name's Delta. Now, I got a couple questions. First, do you by any chance know where Mango Island is? Or where I could buy a map? Anything really would help." "You should probably leave here," the man said instead of answering. "But best avoid Mango Island too if I was you. I hear Nico Robin's been spotted round those parts." "Well, if I can't stay here and I shouldn't go there, where should I be?" The bartender shook his head. "Wish I could tell you, but way I see it, this pirate age is gonna last till there's not a one person without that question in their head." "That's some pretty smart thoughts, guy. Perry, if you don't mind." He leaned down onto the bar, looking up at a clock over in the corner of the room. He sighed. "Welp, some god must really hate you." "Why's that?" Delta asked. "Let's put it this way, there's no need for you to leave now, the danger's come to you." "And what danger is that?" Of course it was pirates, but confirmation was key. "It's high noon. Go outside, see for yourself." Delta nodded, turning and stepping away. The door closed behind him while he turned to the sound of increasingly loud chattery laughter, the only sound in the whole ghost town. "Okay, so yeah, pirates. 20 or 30 at least, of all shapes and sizes, wielding guns and swords, ready to loot." And with observation, he saw a ship hastily anchored over at the coast. A few pirates were even still there, doing the finishing touches. Ah, so that was why Delta hadn't noticed a presence. When he arrived, they weren't even on land. He pulled his right arm to his torso and stretched. Time to beat up some East Blue punks, then off to Mango Island. Maybe with the pirates out of the picture, the town'd be more forthcoming with directions. He walked toward the group until they finally noticed him. It took a shockingly long time for that to happen. Delta sighed. He was in East Blue, he shouldn't be expecting even a modicum of real resistance. The group stopped, staring at Delta for a long moment. He decided to wait it out, see if his visage intimidated them enough to leave, or if they all were truly as stupid as they looked. Guess which one it was. "Our first victim taxpayer." The short chubby one in front guffawed, causing a chorus of laughter to erupt from the others. Shorty raised his sword. "You're a new one, I see. Well, beware the might of the Krieg pirates." Delta's brow scrunched. Krieg. Wait, he'd heard that before, they were someone weak. His eyes widened. "You mean big lips, purple hair? That guy had been around this long?" "Don't mock the Don like that," Shorty shouted. "He's the most powerful man in East Blue. With a 10 million beery bounty, he makes the very sea tremble." The crew continued shouting and stomping in agreement. A real raucous, really. Okay. Well, would you all leave please? I need some help and you're scaring these people. And if you don't, I'll have to kick the crap out you, and you don't want that, so." Shorty, the only one Delta even cared to look at, glared. "I don't cares if he's a taxpayer, kill him." They charged. 00000. Beep beep, important announcement. The battle was so lame that it's not even worth writing. And once Delta finished with them, he went to the ship, beat up the other pirates, and sunk their ship with one fist. So afraid, the pirates took a tiny lifeboat and all piled into it in order to escape. Beep beep, announcement over. 00000. Well, that wasn't at all interesting, Delta thought as he walked back to the town. Standing outside, staring with wide eyes, was Terry. And a bunch of assorted townsfolk. "What are you?" Terry asked in awe. "Delta, the pirate. But see, I'm a good pirate. Not a hero, but a good pirate." He laughed. It felt good. He really didn't laugh enough anymore. He used to be so chipper. "You know Terry, you seem tough. You should be a good pirate too. The mustache pirates with you as captain, sailing the high seas, drinking as much as you want and doing whatever you want. I see it." Terry looked away, a speculative look on his face. To the rest of the growing crowd, Delta yelled, "Hey. Does anyone know how to get to Mango Island?" maybe a map. Maybe someone who can read maps. As the crowd began yelling various answers simultaneously, how unhelpful, Terry placed his arm on Delta's shoulder. If you're a pirate, that mean you have a crew? Delta smiled softly. Used to. Now, it's me, myself, and I. Got a ship. Used to. But I had to ditch it and flew the rest of the way here. Terry's mustache twitched. He ignored that last bit. Lucky you, I got a ship and a bit o' map skill myself. If you want, I could get you to Mango. Sounds like a plan. But seriously, you're not joining my crew. You gotta make one yourself. Later, obviously. Terry frowned. I didn't ask. And you don't have a crew. Delta grinned. Exactly. And, at least for now, I'm keeping it that way. He turned away, walking dramatically down the street. Still, doesn't mean I can't have a temper too. You're going the wrong way, Terry called. Oops. Delta turned around to find that everyone was watching him. I'll follow you then. Sure you don't want to stay for the night? He jabbed a thumb at the crowd of excited folks behind him. Way it sounds, the recipe a party tonight, what with the pirates gone and all, and you could be the guest of honor. Delta shook his head. No can do. I really do have to be at Mango as soon as possible. I'm meeting someone there, but I really don't know how long they'll stay there. Nah, I getcha, Terry said, waving his arm. Let me just grab some of my good stuff and we'll be off. A few minutes later, Terry walked out of his bar with a sack full of what looked like bottles and bottles of alcohol. And what's in the bag? Delta asked. Essentials. Clothes, some water, bit o' food, and a couple bottles of liquors. Delta sniffed. I can smell the alcohol from here. Add more than a bit, then. Terry began to walk off. You need to be there soon, right? Then let's go. He laughed. It was a fishing vessel, vastly bigger than his old boat, not that that was much of an accomplishment. It even had 4 hammocks below deck. Op used to be a fisherman, taught me everything about sailing I know. When he passed it on, and here it's at ever since. Terry gently stepped onto the boat, causing it to moan out a creak. I don't use it much, so be careful walking about. Who knows if one of these beams have gone weak after so long. Yeah, it wasn't a great ship. Nothing like the Sunny whatsoever, or even the Mary. Not even close. But it had charm. And he was sailing with Handlebar Terry, future pirate extraordinaire, towards Mango Island to find Robin. Delta laughed again for a good long while. And he really didn't laugh enough anymore. Maybe he could change that. Terry stood at the helm, gripping the old wheel in his hands. By my estimate, we'll be at Mango Island in, dunno, half a day maybe. Bit less. Delta's eyebrows shot up. We're that close. Awesome. Terry chuckled. I said earlier God must hate you. Maybe I was wrong. Delta laughed again. It was such a good feeling. Maybe. Fun fact of the day. Delta always loved the sea, even before he had left Goa the first time. The breeze, bright glisten of the water, all of it. Which made it all the more ironic, is this correct usage? That his devil fruit, the item from which he gained all his power to travel the seas as he pleased, also made it so that he could never touch it. Or, at least, without losing all of his strength. And since he ate the fruit so early in his life, he didn't even have so much as a fond memory to look back on. Sometimes life wasn't fair. A similar thing was occurring now, though slightly more serious, and a hell of a lot more emotionally impairing. Being thrown into the past sucked, but it had now been something like 3-4 years, and he had come to accept the sad fact that he may never see his crew again. Acceptance was really the only way he would ever move on. But here's where it gets tough to think about. Now, on his way to Mango Island, Delta was the most excited he'd been in most likely his entire life, and he'd been pretty damn excited in his younger days. And he couldn't stop laughing constantly. Really, Terry must have been regretting his decision to come along. Probably thought Delta was some sort of psychopath or something. And at the moment, Delta couldn't find it in himself to care. This is the conundrum. He never wanted to leave his crew and life as the Pirate King, but this was probably the best feeling he'd ever had in his life. Like drugs, but natural and better. How far off are we? Delta asked, scanning the horizon. I just as told ya, we're close, Terry said, taking a swig of his brew. But how close is close? Close, or clueless? Or, like, close. Terry blinked a couple times, then looked down at his bottle. He shook his head, dropping the bottle. Close, he repeated, slower. Delta grumbled. And it's straight ahead. Yup. Delta placed his hand to his chin, frowning. You don't need me to park, right? No. What do you? Delta didn't hear the rest of Terry's sentence, as he'd burst off the boat and into the air, careful not to break the deck, chasing the sun as he geppoed straight ahead at lightning speed. Actually, scratch that thing he was thinking at the beginning. This feeling, if anything, was too good. If he didn't calm down from the high soon, who knew what would happen? Ah, and he'd stopped above, and dropped onto Mango Island. He looked down at his non-existent pocket watch. 30 minutes, more like 30 seconds. Ha. Delta did feel a little bad for abandoning Mustache Terry, but he wasn't certain he could last another 30 minutes and wait. His heart was pounding too fast. He looked around at his surrounding. Beaches and palm trees, nice. And a whole bunch of mango trees. He stretched his arm to grab a few. He squeezed them. They weren't ripe. Delta shrugged, tossing a couple in his mouth. Oh well. Now that his hunger was temporarily sort of sated because would he ever not be hungry, it was time to find Robin. He reached out with his observation, only to find a lot of people spread out all over the place. Okay, so Mango Island was big. He could deal with that. Robin was strong, her aura had to have a pretty distinct signature when compared with most people, even if she was a little math 22. Holy shit. Nico Robin, the adult, was 22. And he was 27. He, Monkey D. Delta, was 5 years older than Robin. He grabbed his head to keep it from spinning and swallowed. From reading the news, to meeting Terry, to sailing all the way here with a picture in hand, it hadn't occurred to him. He was so stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Of course she wasn't the Robin he knew and loved. This Robin was just a kid, alone in the world. This Robin hadn't turned herself into the world government to save him, or joined the Revolutionary Army during their 2-year break. This was Robin, but it wasn't. It wasn't her. It wasn't. A tear dropped from his eye, sliding down his cheek and dropping off, hitting the sand below with nary a sound. This was what he got. No, this is what he deserved for getting so excited. What was he gonna do anyway? Run up, hug her, and say hi Robin. I've missed you so much. Yeah, that would work. Right before she tries to kill him and the Marines show up to arrest her, because of course she was in hiding now that her location had been leaked. Still, she had at least a few days before any Marines with actual skill showed up. They were in the East Blue, after all. Head hung in defeat, he started to walk forward, aimlessly going wherever his feet would take him. He hadn't yet given up on finding Robin, but a lot of that ballooning excitement had deflated. Edit, balloon. Cause he's a rubber man. And he blows himself up. Right. Haha. From how he was sensing it, there were 3 major towns on Mango Island, and he'd have to check each separately. To search out Robin from his position, taking in every single person in that big of a radius, with only her stronger than average power to differentiate from all others would be near impossible, even with the skills of a pirate king. If there was one thing Delta could give Mango Island credit for, its architecture was very nice and fancy. Not in the classical rich parts of Goa type of fancy, but in a more modern beach-time Sabati way. Yes, it was a very nice high-class Isle of East Blue, which of course meant that the people sucked. As he walked into town no more like city number 1 on his list, it immediately bombarded him with a storm of pomp and unearned superiority complexes. Made Delta want to gag. But no, Robin was possibly here and he couldn't give up that easily. So he kept his face blank and walked forward, reaching to every nook and cranny of the city for any sign of Robin, ignoring all the judgy stares at his attire and countenance. Easy to say, he would take a fight over dealing with a wealthy any day. Sir. Sir, have you seen that sign? Delta was brought out of his hockey days. He turned to the voice. Sorry, what? The large, bald, and burly man in a suit was glaring down at him. He pointed. The sign. Read it. No loitering. It says no loitering. The job, the man mocked. You can read. So scram, if you know what's good for you. I'm not loitering. In large purposeful motions, the man looked all around the little area. Finally, he looked back at Delta. Sorry sir, maybe I didn't look hard enough. Where are the items you purchased from this establishment? Delta glared. Fine. He looked around. What store was he even in? Clothing. Okay, clothing. He could do clothing. He began walking away from the security guard. Wait, where are you going? He asked. Delta turned back. Shopping, duh. Like you could afford anything here. And this was why he hated rich people. Even their security was snooty. Oh yeah? Watch me. Less than 30 seconds between that sentence and Delta realizing that no, he could not afford anything in this store. Not his fault, who in their right mind would ever pay 13 million Beely for a coat? Ever. And that security guard was still watching him, a smug look on his face. Arg. He didn't have time for this. He needed to find Robin, but then also, he really didn't want to lose this battle. Damn it, he was petty. Using all the speed he could muster without destroying the store with air pressure, Delta checked each and every price tag in the store until finally, he found it. For 250,000 Beely, on sale 4 times now, was a straw hat covered almost entirely in a silky maroon wrap. He had no idea how a straw hat could be so expensive, but then nothing of the rich culture had permeated his mind in any meaningful way. It was still expensive, so expensive, but it wouldn't break the bank, so he picked it up, walked to the register while staring at the security, and purchased it. Not a word was spoken. He put on the hat. Something about wearing the straw hat felt wrong. Really wrong. He didn't take it off yet. He passed by the security guard. "Hey," Delta said. What do you?" Delta punched him in the face and ran, gripping onto the straw hat so it wouldn't fall off. Off in the far distance now, the security guard called for a squad of Marines to be ordered in. Totally worth it. Oh, and if he was a criminal now, then. Delta ran back to the store, punching the security guard again, shot to the register where a woman stood frozen in shock, and took back his beery. He was a pirate, after all. Huge numbers of people had begun to walk out from their shops and homes to see what the commotion was about, a few pointing while another couple had transponder snails out, recording the whole event. And more importantly, his face. Delta sighed. If Robin had ever been in the city, she sure as hell wouldn't be much longer. Taking one last look through his observation, he realized it was a lost cause. With so many excited people crowded in such a tight area, no way would he see her. It was time to move on to town number 2. Since the island and its cities were so big, there was a good chance he wouldn't even be reported to the other 2 locations. Which was good, because if he knew Robin, and he did, she would flee at the first sign of trouble. He just hoped she hadn't left the island yet after that news report. No, he couldn't think about that. Had to keep looking. If the first city was extravagant, then this was just silly. Enormous gold lettering shone above all the tall buildings, reading out Dyson City. Land of Dreams. A bit flashy, but it wasn't all bad. At least now, he didn't have to keep calling it city number 2. A quick scan of the area showed that Dyson City boasted a pretty large, pretty decadent coastline, covered from head to base with ships of all shapes and sizes. Perfect for any pirate trying to escape. Someone like Robin. He grinned. And with all the security patrolling the docks, it'd take a while to plan out any evasion attempt. MEANING she was probably still here. Dyson City wasn't the type of place he would usually go to if he were looking for Robin, more of Namie-esque joint, but it made sense. With all the people, and more importantly, wealthy people, Marines would tend to leave the area be, and she could blend into the vast numbers. Smart. Still, hard to hide when a pirate king was following you, not that he was one to brag. One deep look into the city, and location acquired. Well, it was the strongest aura on the island, so he hoped it was her. Considering it was in a spot right near the docks, he felt pretty confident. He started walking toward the location, following his senses and was tackled to the ground from behind. Target acquired. Someone off to the side shouted. Delta twisted his neck to find a trio of Marines standing over Marines, and a 4th holding him down. That was fast. "Get off me," Delta shouted, roughly knocking the Marine into his trio of compatriots. He ran. No. He escaped. A Marine yelled into his transponder. "We are currently in pursuit, southwest side of Dyson. Target seems to be extremely strong. Calling backup, approach with caution." No matter, the 4 Marines already lost sight of him when he threw himself into a crowd of tourist-looking folks. Now, all he had to do was keep a low profile as he crossed the city, and it'd be fine. "Hey. You're the guy from the video." A little girl shouted, pointing at Delta. "You have a very pretty hat." All around him, people turned to look, eyes widening with recognition. Delta felt the top of his head, and sure enough, that silky hat was there. He must have forgotten about it in all the commotion. The crowd slowly creeped backwards to avoid him, the man from the video. The transponder snails. They had his face on tape, and apparently it was popular. Well, that wasn't good for discretion. Delta sighed. No getting around it now. He was just gonna have to find Robin as soon as possible, before things got too wild. "Yep, it's me," Delta said to the girl, thrusting his thumb to his chest. "Name's Delta. Okay, bye." He ran. No, ran wasn't the right word for this sort of speed. He soared, if that was a verb. Somewhere behind him, an alarm started blaring. This was getting out of hand. He weaved in and out through throngs of people out for a day of fun and relaxation, causing windstorms in his wake. A human storm. Mass hysteria all around, and he arrived in front of the building holding the big aura. It was a bar. Go figure. And a cheap one at that. Looking around, the whole area screamed Wild West poverty. Like the classic shady city block right beside insert any social hub here. Of course Robin would stay somewhere like this. Scummy thugs and pirates were her element. He pushed at one of the swinging doors, stepping inside. He ignored a pair of eyes to his side who'd watched him appear out of nowhere in front of the building. Sorry, appeared out of nowhere according to their limited eyesight-related capabilities. The bar's inside was as dumpy as the outer shell would suggest. A light film of dust covered nearly all the furniture, and some of the walls had begun to rot. The whole place smelled faintly of mildew, which wasn't very comforting, and all the 8 or 9 patrons were watching him warily. Except one. Alone in the far corner, seated on a stool with her back turned to him, was Nico Robin. It took all the self-control he'd learned in his years not to immediately scream and grab her. She didn't know him whatsoever, and first impressions were everything. Delta walked to the bar, each step louder than the last, until he was at the seat beside hers. Each movement he made was a dream, some surreal action that he didn't fully understand. He was sitting down now. She still hadn't looked at him, but he was looking at her. He couldn't look away. She was Nico Robin, no doubt. That slim face, those regal apathetic features, were all trademark Robin. But at the same time, something was different. She was so much younger. And he felt so old for saying something like that, but she was. She was 7 years younger than him as he was, and she looked it. Everything about her, though similar, was less defined, more childlike, at least a little, and it unnerved him. He'd never seen Robin like this, which brought a bunch of other thoughts to spiral. The most uncomfortable was, what if he had seen her like this and simply didn't remember the specifics of her face anymore? Maybe after 4 years, his memory had rewritten her face a little. Just tiny minutia, but still. "Can I help you?" Robin asked. At least her voice sounded familiar. Cold, distant, and polite, but familiar. Right, yes, Delta got out. "Yes you can, actually. See, I need your help." "My help?" See, Delta had actually been thinking about what he would do out on the open seas for a while now. Since he'd already found the One Piece before, and with all those adventures along the way and after, he wanted to tread into new waters. Funny enough, he actually was pretty sure Robin had the exact skill set to help him. "Yeah. So I've decided to find the CC fruit." Robin looked surprised. She didn't look surprised very often, and it was only for a moment, but she looked surprised. She smiled. "Fake. A mythical fruit, able to control the very sea that would kill all other users. That is quite the mission." Her eyes narrowed, just a pinch. "Apologies, but how is it that I can help specifically?" "Well, you can read the poneglyphs, right? Way I figure, something as legendary as the CC fruit has got to be on one of them, so I need you to be there to let me know. Who knows, might even count as the hidden 4th great weapon." He grinned. "So, what do you say?" She shook her head. "Thank you for thinking of me, but I will have to decline for now." "Aw, why?" Not that he was going to take no for an answer. "At this moment, it is the fact that the Marines are right outside, ready to arrest you, Delta, and I wish not to be in the crossfire." Delta waved his hand. "Those chumps. I can beat those guys. More importantly, you've seen the video. Do I look good in it?" "Cool. And how do you know my name?" "You told a little girl before disappearing." "Wait, someone was recording that." "Oh no. We can't let that video leave this island. Garp's gonna be so mad if he sees it, and I do not want to deal with that." Robin watched on passively as Delta fell apart. "And how'd they even find me? I moved so fast, there's no way someone in East Blue could keep up with me. I can't believe this." "The Marines followed the storm you left in your haste. It happened that the storm stopped right in front of this establishment, so here they are." Delta's eyes widened. "Genius," he was perplexed. "How do you know all this?" "I've been watching one of the many news reports all around the city using my devil fruit abilities. I'm sure you know what they are, as you know who I am." Her polite smile never once faded. "I'm sorry to say, you've become island-wide news. If your goal was discretion, I believe this is what they call failure." Delta dropped his head onto the bar. "I know. I'm so bad at that. Sorry, Robin, that I lead the Marines right to you. I'll beat them up, so it won't really matter, but still. It's quite alright. And you're sure you don't want to come with me? It's gonna be fun. A real adventure. Thank you for the offer, but..." The doors were ripped off their hinges as a swarm of Marines entered the bar. "Hands up." Delta smirked. Marines really were just so adorable, and it had been so long since he'd directly encountered any. As the Pirate King, the new Marines gave him a wide berth. Delta had mostly forgotten about their general presence in the world. Always so high and mighty, always with the moral high ground, they reminded him strongly of a militaristic version of rich people. But right now, he was talking to Robin and did not want to deal with them. Hence, Conqueror's hockey. When all the other patrons of the bar, save Robin, also fell unconscious, Delta realized he hadn't been focusing nearly enough. Great power, great responsibilities kind of lesson. He turned back to Robin. She was staring at him in shock. "Robin?" Her face tried to resume its normal features. She got close. Seemed that a younger Robin hadn't fully mastered the neutral expressions of her more mature self. He liked her this way. "Yes, Delta. Sorry if this sounds rude, but you seem the type to be drawn to power, maybe because it's what keeps you safe and alive, maybe more. Along that line of thinking, I can honestly say that I am quite possibly the most powerful person you have ever met, including your admiral friends. The shock was starting to return, a tad. Nearly made Delta laugh. Yeah, I know about the Buster call on O'Hara. So what I'm saying is, well, ignoring my plan to find the CC fruit, it would be safer for you to be near me than anywhere else in the world. The smile had gone, her voice cold. And why do you care about my safety? Delta sighed. TSK, can't tell you that. But I will say that I believe you to be very important, one of the most important people alive right now, and I believe you have great things to do in your life. A wistful smile crossed his lips. Call me a good Samaritan, but I trust my gut, and the hope of a better future is worth keeping you happy and safe at my side. She looked nearly ready to accept his proposal. So close. And sure, this was technically a form of emotional manipulation, but it was Robin he was talking about. He couldn't let her go. Robin would understand, were she here. Look, think about it like this. Whether or not I'm actually as strong as I say I am, you can still probably figure I'm more powerful than you, one-on-one. If I really had any negative motives, I would act. But I don't, so I won't. See? Robin's jaw clenched with a hidden nervousness. So close, so close. Alright, she affirmed. I'll come with you. Where is your ship? Delta's smile was wide, a firm sideways deep below his nose. He didn't remember that last time he smiled like this. Had to have been never mind. He laughed. Awesome. My ship is. You don't know where your ship is? No, I do, sort of. We were about a half hour from shore, but I was worried you'd leave and I'd miss you, so I jumped the rest of the way here, so give me a sec. He just had to find Terry. Terry would probably have docked a little while ago, and hopefully he hadn't left the ship. So far from any life on the coast, it would be easy to pinpoint him. A pair of footsteps approached them at running speed. Delta looked over. Delta? Terry shouted, gripping his knees, panting like. Dog. To Delta. You have no idea how tired and drunk I am. Why while you leave me lie thaw. I've been all over this damn mango trying to find you. There's Marines here, Dino. He stumbled to the side, hitting a table. He grabbed it for balance. And your face, it's all over Thaw Island. Big ole moving posters showing your face. It's all over. One of 'em saw you walking in here, so Thaw's where I came. Here Terry's eyes bugged. He stage whispered, Delta, don't look now, Nico Rob's right next to you. Marines must be stationed all around the bar, why would they let him through? Unless, were they using Terry as bait? What a bunch of shits. Robin, do you know how to sail? Delta asked. Well enough, she replied. Why? The drunk's Terry. Terry is my current navigator. Ah. Terry fell over, unconscious. Did you use your power on him? Delta shook his head. Nope. He's just blackout hammered. I'll carry him. So if he's here, and unconscious. He's the only one who knows where it is. Solution, get a new ship. Funny, there are a whole lot right next to us. Don't you have any belongings? One's your ship. Delta shrugged. Not a problem. I can go back and get it once we're out at sea. Robin hummed in sort of understanding. I started making a plan on how to bypass the security. No need, Delta said. In case you've forgotten, there are a whole lot of Marines outside waiting for us, and I doubt your plan incorporated that. He walked to Terry and flung the man over his shoulder. Also, I am extremely strong, which can make plans much simpler in my experience. Robin smirked. Then I'll follow your lead, Captain. Temporary captain, but yeah, I like the sound of that. You really couldn't have brought the liquor. Terry whined, splayed out on the deck while Robin sailed. After crushing the Marines, they hadn't picked the nicest ship that wouldn't be practical. It was much too large and decadent, not really built for a pirate crew of 3, who may or may not be in the Grand Line soon. Instead, they'd gone with a smaller, more easily maneuverable trading ship. Still not perfect, but better than nothing. Once they were suitably far from the hellhole known as Mango Island, Delta had quickly returned, found the old fishing boat, and grabbed the essential items. He had left any and all alcoholic beverages on board. One could not be a good seafaring captain if one was also a blackout drunk. Call it grooming for success. As captain, I am hereby enacting prohibition on board this ship, Delta said, seated on a rather low crow's nest. Devil, Terry said. Delta shook his head. He pointed at Robin, relaxed on a beach chair beside the wheel that they'd found in the ship's hull. No, that's her. Terry's face dropped to the side. Right. Her. Explain to me again, why do we have Nico Robin on this ship? She is important to me, Delta said. And that's that. The captain wishes to find the CC fruit and believes me to be a valuable asset to the search, Robin interjected, tone cool and calm. Delta could have slammed his head in the ground. She thought he was using her. Ugh. How annoying. Harry nodded, still lying on the deck. that makes sense. His head rocked back to the ground. Wait, we're searching for the CC fruit. Wait, I thought devil fruits were a myth. Wait, Nico Robin, please don't kill me. What was I thinking yesterday when I joined this? Delta jumped down from the crow's nest. Yes, we're gonna find the CC fruit, and yes, devil fruits are very real. Robin's eaten one, actually. And she's not gonna kill you. Robin is our friend. He looked up. Right, Robin. Of course, Captain, she lied. Delta held back from calling her out on it. See? He said instead. She loves you. That sounded pretty fake, Delta Terry said, lips pinched. Well, it wasn't, Delta snapped. Why was he being so difficult? Robin is our friend, has always been our friend, and that's that. Something must have changed on his face, cause now Terry seemed a bit scared. Alright, Delta. Whatever you say. And now Terry's face was Sabo, a child so afraid of his existence that he left Foosha. Why was he doing this, Delta wondered. He'd left to change, become better, but all he could do was act the same. Maybe he was going insane. Maybe he already was. I am sorry, Delta said, looking away. I shouldn't have been so rude to you. Robin is our friend, but I should have pushed that on you like that. He took a couple steps back to put some distance between them. Terry sat up. No, that's alright. You know, Delta, has anyone told you that you're scary? Yes, actually. Delta nodded. But I'm trying to change. For myself and for my brothers. That's pretty admirable, Terry said, smiling. Good on you. His smile turned lost. You have brothers. Delta couldn't help a grin forming on his face. Yup, 3 of them. Luffy's the youngest, he's 9. And Ace and Sabo are both 11, but Ace is almost 12. They're great. All of them. Harry smiled along with him. You know, this is the happiest I think I've seen you. Cause this is real, not that creepy, uncontrollable excitement you were doing on the way to Mango. It seems normal, natural, like you're a proud dad or something. Delta laughed. Yeah, sorry about all that before. This is just the longest I've been away from those guys for a long time, and it'll be a while before I go back. I think it's getting to me. From up at the helm, Robin piped up. If you love them so much, why would you leave? That's a good question, Terry agreed. Why did you leave? Delta plopped down onto the deck, crisscrossing his legs. Had to, for their own good. I was becoming a bad influence. They needed to learn good morals to live by. I wasn't the one to teach them, simple as that. Which is why I'm here, trying to learn them myself. Harry looked up to the calm, bright sky. One last question. If that's what you want to do, then why look for this CC fruit? What does that have to do with anything? Oh, that's just so I have a goal in mind as I travel. I like goals. They keep me focused. Fair enough. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, allowing the beauty of the still water and cool skies to entrap each of their minds. Tranquility, that's what he needed. To find peace. Easier said than done. Harry broke the silence. So where are we going? The New World. The New World, okay. He did a spit take. Since when was there water in his mouth? The New World. Yup. Robin even seemed a little surprised, but she kept quiet. Why? I figure that anything as mythical and powerful as the CC fruit has got to be somewhere extreme. And the most intense place out there is the New World. But the Yonko are out there. Delta shrugged. I can beat a Yonko. Plus, only a couple of them are even that bad, so no harm there. No harm? Are you insane? Sounds fun, Captain, Robin called. But that may take a while. To get to the New World, we first must enter the beginning of the Grand Line, traverse the whole way, and come out the other side. That alone may take months. Delta shook his head, chuckling. You're well informed, dear Robin, but sadly mistaken. There is another way to get to the New World, and it's much faster, safer, and all around better. Her interest piqued. And which way might that be? His smile grew. Cross the East Blue and climb the Red Line, duh. You scale it, turn right and walk for a bit, and then jump off. Simple. Harry's eyes were pure white, and he spun unsteadily on his heels. Can you please get rid of this prohibition? I need a drink. DSK Terry. It hasn't even been a day. Do you hate me? I'm toughening you up. It's builds character. Harry turned to Robin, face set in fear. Please Robin. Say something about this. Her smile was the most real it had been so far. Made Delta's heart leap out of its chest. I think it sounds quite interesting. See, Robin gets it. A learning experience. I knew Nico Robin was gonna try and kill me, Terry moped. But I didn't know she would find such a cruel and unusual way of doing it. Shishishishishi. Delta ran to the bow of the ship, striking a pose as he pointed forward into the far distance. Onward and forward, Robin, to the New World. Aye. Harry dropped back onto the ground, all the fight suddenly out of him. Well, whatever. We might as well find the One Piece while we're at it. Delta looked out at the vast sea. "No," he said. "That's not what I meant to do." In a quiet voice, too low for the others to hear, he muttered, "I already did, and look what it got me. Oof, how angsty. 00000. That pirate ship had been trailing them for at least a day by now, Delt reckoned. The thing was big and slow, so it had no chance of catching up as they were, but still. Why? Delta didn't recognize the ship, so it couldn't belong to anyone important, and the only people he'd dealt with at all so far had been the Marines and the Creek pirates. Those guys he'd let run away with their tail between their legs a couple days ago must have gone and tattled to their big bad armator captain, 10 million Beery ruler of East Blue. Delta barely remembered Krieg. He was a vague imprint on one day of his life in East Blue, 10 years ago now. Or was that 9 years in the future? Didn't matter, to his mind, Krieg was a blip. But the one part of that blip he remembered was that Krieg wore a suit made of gold. And the only type of person who would ever even think of doing something so stupid as that would be a pompous prideful prick. AKA, the worst kind of person. The pompous prideful prick would never let something like a part of his crew being beat up by one guy go, so unless he dealt with it now, Delta was confident that the ship was in no hurry to let up on the chase. He did give props to Krieg that he found him so fast. That was impressive. Probably did it with that huge armada of his, having them search for clues. Someone had to have seen the Mango Island footage, asked around, and learned in what direction they were headed. Even if weak, an enormous crew can get a lot done in a short bit of time. "I finally figured out who that pirate ship belongs to," Delta stated. He was seated cross-legged on the ground beside Robin, who remained on a chair at the helm. Harry continued to lay splayed out on the deck. Delta figured such a weird position was helping him cope with going cold turkey on alcohol. "Who?" Robin asked. She was so much more talkative as a 22-year-old. It was fun. "The Creek pirates." "Oh, that makes sense," Terry said. He then threw his hands over his face. "Aw man. We've got a guy with a 10 million Beery bounty chasing us. And we have a 79 million Beery bounty next to me and me," Delta responded. "Calm it down, we'll be fine. That ship is so big, it will never catch up to us, anyway." Harry was quiet for a minute. "That's good then. All we have to do is keep the safe distance and—" "I'm gonna go beat him up and take his bounty," Delta said resolutely. "I've never cashed in on a bounty before, but now's as good a time as any to start." He stood up. "Robin, stop the boat." "Delta, are you crazy?" Terry cried. "What are you saying?" "Harry, shut up. You are being obnoxious." Delta started stretching. "I don't think you yet understand how strong I am. Let me give you a demonstration." 00000. Delta waited a little while for the ship to grow larger behind them, if only to make it more noticeable for Terry as she. Robin would only ever admit this in the sanctity of her own mind, but she was quite interested in what the mysterious man who'd picked her up was going to do. She'd seen him basically fly now, with a technique eerily similar to that of CP9, forever sketched in her mind, and he'd knocked several people unconscious without even touching them, not to mention that he'd moved so fast on Mango Island that he created a windstorm. Needless to say, the man was obviously extremely powerful and not afraid to show it. She wanted to see what he would do next, what his limits were. He claimed to be stronger than a Marine admiral, even a Yonko. It seemed so far-fetched, she'd have completely ignored anyone else to say it, but Delta was different. There was something off about him, like he exuded an aura of strength that anyone could sense to some degree, offset only by the fact that he really didn't look the part at all. He was an enigma. Robin hadn't dealt with many human enigmas in her life. Pirates never were. Delta was something new. Don Krieg's ship was closer now, close enough to squint and make out a skull and crossbones. The enigma dropped into a fighting stance, knees bent, hands clenched at his torso. His face bent into a frown. Whoosh. She didn't even see him leave. One moment, he was right next to her, the next, he was across the ocean, a tiny dot beside a giant ship. Boom. The next moment, half the ship was gone, and a rain of screaming pulsed in her ears, faint and harsh. The back end of the ship, though intact, wasn't faring very well, already sinking at a surprisingly fast rate into the deep blue. Delta had done this. In 3 seconds, with only his physical body and the clothes on his back, Delta had done this. Maybe he was the monster he said he was. And if that was true, maybe the rest of his admittedly silly speech was no. She wouldn't get her hopes up like that. He needed her, that was all. That was what she was to him, a tool. And she refused to believe that she could be anything else. Delta was undoubtedly the strongest pirate she'd ever met, but he was still a pirate. A cruel, uncaring pirate. He had to be. 000. Delta stepped onto his ship carrying the broken form of Don Krieg above his back. Once he got settled in, he dropped the purple-haired man to the ground with a thud. Krieg didn't even stir. He may have gone overboard with that punch, Delta thought in hindsight. Surely something of that magnitude would be reported, and in the easy blue of all places, it meant trouble. Not to mention the recent video of him in Mango Island. If nobody else, Garp was gonna put two and two together very quickly. Delta just crossed his fingers that the old shit was way on the other side of the ocean and he wouldn't have to deal with him for a very long time. He doubted fate was going to be so kind. "Harry, would you go find some rope below deck?" Delta asked. "Krieg won't be down forever and I don't want him running around on my ship." "You're God, aren't you?" Terry asked rhetorically. "A god in physical form. That's the only possible way. Only way that you could go get the rope." Harry scooped himself off the ground and shuffled down below deck. "Those clothes he's wearing look valuable," Robin stated. "You may want to undress him before turning him over to the Marines." Delta nodded. Not a bad idea. No gold suit, though. What a shame. He ignored Robin's quizzical look at the statement. She wouldn't understand. He kneeled over and removed Krieg's coat and shirt to reveal a very hairy chest. Delta learned something new: Krieg did not dye his hair purple. That was au naturel. Upon closer inspection, it appeared Robin was right, all his clothes looked like they were sewn with silver or something of that kind. Again, what pomp. Harry emerged from below holding a several yards of rope in his hands. "Found it. Great job, now give it here." Once he was handed the rope and he bent down to tie Krieg, Delta ran into a problem that he wasn't exactly sure how to solve. That was annoying. He'd never tied up a person before. He didn't even know where to start. "Robin, can you help me with this?" "Of course, Captain," she said, but didn't sound like she was getting up. Suddenly, several of her devil fruit arms sprouted from the deck, moving with a strange-to-watch perfection of synchronicity. The arm closest to him digested him of the rope, while the one beside that grabbed an end of it. He liked Robin. He liked her power. It was strong, helpful, and unique. He looked away from the arms surrounding Krieg's body. This was too weird for him. "Ah!" Terry yelled, falling back onto his bum. "Delta, there are arms everywhere. Living arms, do you see them? Oh god, when did you give me shrooms? This is too cruel, even for you Nico Robin." "Harry, shut up," Delta spoke, missing much of his conviction. "You're not high, this is Robin's devil fruit power. She can create limbs and other pieces of herself anywhere she wants. It's cool." "It's creepy," Terry said instead. He watched the arms waving around, tying off Krieg for a few moments. "And cool. Yeah, creepy and cool. How does it work?" "To me," Robin started, "it simply feels like an extension of myself in places one wouldn't naturally understand. Like many devil fruit powers, it took years of practice and effort to fully comprehend, though the results can be quite useful. So they all work like regular arms, and you've trained your brain and body long enough to be good at using it," Terry summed up, mostly to himself. "That's impressive." "Thank you, Terry-san." Later that day, Krieg woke up. It was immediately apparent to all on board that he'd risen, since it began with indiscriminate yelling, followed by bragging, followed by callous yelling. All in the span of 5 minutes. It was at that point that Delta couldn't take it anymore. He stomped down to Krieg, neatly tied and thrown below deck, and told the man to shut up. "Let me go this instant." Krieg yelled. "Do you know who I am? I am Don Krieg, captain of the—" "No, stop now," Delta said. "I do know who you are, your speech is unnecessary. Actually, it's why I caught you in the first place. We're gonna go cash in your bounty. It's gonna be great." He paused. "Not for you, obviously, but hey. You can't do that." He looked to be telling that more to himself than Delta. "I am Don Krieg, highest bounty in East Blue. You Mango Island upstart couldn't defeat me. It's impossible." "Let's not call me Mango Island upstart again, thank you. I really didn't like that place, much too snobby for me. Come to think of it, I feel like you'd have fit in perfectly." "Well now you won't, cause you'll be in jail, but again, eh?" Krieg starts back up with his indiscriminate yelling. Delta kicked him in the face. He'd be out for another couple hours with that. Hopefully, that was long enough to reach an island with some good marine presence. Hopefully. He stepped back out onto the deck. The sun had begun to set, which was pretty. At the same time, he really wanted to get to an island as soon as possible, which the nighttime sometimes hindered. "Robin, how close to an island are we?" She was looking down at a map of East Blue. Of course she was the type of person to just have something like that on hand. Very useful. "An hour, maybe 2, depending on the wind," she said. "Okay, that's good. Will we be there before dark?" "Possibly, though I have no control over that." 00000. It was still technically light outside when they reached the island. And Delta didn't know much about the trade, but he had learned that Marines stopped taking in bounty trades after nightfall for some semantic reason or another. To him, reasoning didn't matter so long as he arrived before that point. "Alright, so Terry, I'll hold you in one arm and Krieg in the other, and then I'll run really fast to the Marine base, okay?" Then you grab Krieg and bring him inside, cause I'm on video, and obviously can't, you get the bounty, and boom done. Perry nodded. Okay, I like this plan, minus the you grab me and run thing. Can we skip that part? No time, Delta said. Sun's almost set and you're not fast enough to arrive before that. Perry still looked less than enthused. Look, fine. How about you get on my back and I'll take you like that? It's more dignified at least. Probably realizing it was that best possible option he had on his horizon, Terry mutely nodded again. Delta grinned. Awesome. He gripped Krieg's naked chest and heaved him into the crevice of his arm, then leaned forward slightly for Terry to scoot on. Come on Terry. I don't have all day. Look, I really don't want TOO. No. No. I don't like that at all. No. Delta didn't see, but all of a sudden, Terry's weight had been dropped on his back. That was cue to go, so off he went. 30 seconds later, Delta had located and stopped right outside a marine base. And he'd only had to deal with Terry screaming for 20 of those seconds. He dropped Krieg. Terry fell off. You could never understand how much I didn't like that. Delta grinned, thinking back to his past crew and their reluctance to travel in his grasp. You'd be surprised. Tell me, what was it that got you on my back in the first place? I missed it. Terry sat up. Oh, that was Nico Robin, the devil. She used her power on me. She lifted me off the ground with her crazy arms and tossed me onto you. Cruel and unusual, I'll say it again. Delta laughed. Harder than was absolutely necessary, but picturing it was pretty damn funny. Stop laughing. Terry shouted. Just grab Krieg and get him in there, Delta said. I'll wait here. With only minimum grumbling, Terry tugged Krieg by the ropes across the ground and into the doors, where he disappeared from sight. And Delta was left alone, watching the barely there sun and its last vestiges of orange-purple light splay out over the sea. In a way, he wanted to be like the sun. Metaphorically. Cause the sun was so huge and powerful, not even metaphorically making the world go round, and that was sort of like him on a smaller scale. He was bright and noticeable and strong. But the sun didn't care. The sun, massive and powerful as it was, kept its distance from the petty issues of the blue sea. It never got angry or sad, wild or uncontrollable. The sun was consistent, calm in its power. Yes, he wanted to be like the sun. Life could be so much easier if he was the sun. The powerful emotions that had always tethered him, defined him in life, were starting to get old. It was difficult to deal with them. And if he could destroy an entire island without thinking about it in a temper tantrum, that was definitely something to think about. He refused to become Big Mom, or anything even remotely similar. Terry stepped outside. Delta left the shadows. I got it, Terry said, pointing to a satchel on his shoulders. Should keep us set for a little while. Good. So if there's nothing left to do here, let's get back to the ship. I'm tired. Sounds fine. I'm not getting on your back this time. Fair. They walked side by side in silence. Delta was enjoying the silence more and more recently. Do you think Nico Robin left with the ship? Terry asked. Even as he said it, Delta didn't believe the mustachio actually believed it happened. I trust Robin, Delta said. You should too. I know you do, I know. Question is, does she trust you? Delta sighed. That is the question, isn't it? Look, I can tell that for whatever reason, you really want Nico Robin to like you. Don't ask me why, but you do. And the way I see it, you're going about it in completely the wrong way. Delta raised an eyebrow. And how's that? You're trying too hard. You talk about trust and Robin and belief all the time. Frankly, it's weird. If you really do want to help Robin, remember that actions speak louder than words. The way you act now sounds like you're trying to force this belief onto her. Harry shook his head. It won't work like that. She's just a kid, won't see the intricacies that you honestly believe what you're saying. You gotta show her. Robin's just a kid. And just how old are you, exactly? Not the point of my speech, and you know it. Delta nodded. You're right. Actions speak louder. Harry patted his back kindly. Don't worry, Delta. Give it enough time, if she's as good as you say, Nico Robin's gonna come around. I hope so. That he used manipulation again. Maybe, yes. But if Robin was gonna eavesdrop on their private conversation with her powers, it was only fair to notice and use it against her. A few steps back in the shadows of the grass, a singular ear silently fell into a burst of petals. He wanted to be like the sun. Maybe then, all this trust nonsense would matter less. The sun was carefree. It had control. Delta was bored. The red line, or at least the part that led directly to the new world, was very far away. Since it was the East Blue, with calm waters and little to no violent opposition, they were moving right along at a pretty fast speed, but even still, it would be another few weeks before they ever reached that enormous piece of land. And life was so monotonous on board their little vessel. Wake up, eat, sleep, day in and day out, only ever stopping when running short on supplies or the money was starting to run out. He grinned at the thought. Those were the times when life was most exciting, when he, Terry, and Robin all had to work together to find and incapacitate some petty criminal with a bounty to their liking. The way Delta ate, the periods between money searching were never long. But what was finally starting to catch up to them, something Delta hadn't even considered, was the simple fact that in East Blue, there really weren't all that many notorious criminals with relatively high bounties. Or at least, they were getting harder to find on the drop of a hat. It was a tedious life, not one particularly suited for the likes of Delta. He needed more adventure, more intrigue than this. He needed something to do. He was lying on the ground behind the helm, staring blankly at a vague, bland map of the blue seas, nothing that even came close to Nami's version, when it hit him. Delta's eyes widened, and he sat up suddenly. Adventure was so close, how hadn't he seen it before? They were practically right next to it. 000. Robin, I have a question. Delta's voice sounded out behind her. She turned around. He was sitting up, intently looking at her map of the seas. He seemed almost excited. It was odd. The last time she'd seen her captain anything like this was when they'd first met. Since then, his spark of joy had felt more like a fizzle than the fireworks display on Mango Island. It made her strangely happy for him. Yes, Captain, she asked. What is it? Do you know where the nearest large military base is? She had not been expecting that. They didn't have bounties to turn in on board, did they? No, she would have noticed. Robin regularly inspected the place, top to bottom, unbeknownst to Delta or Terry. Not that she didn't trust them, she did to a point, but old habits and old paranoia die hard. Not off the top of my head, Robin said, smiling. If I may ask, why? We're going on an adventure. Ah. But are we not already sailing for the CC fruit? Has there been a change of plans? Delta shook his head. No, that's still what I've decided to do, but adventures need more than just a destination and getting there. They need sidetracks and things to happen, interesting, unusual things. Robin couldn't deny that though peaceful, these past few weeks had been dull, to say the least. The most interesting part of it all so far was Delta himself, enigma that he was. The enigma she still couldn't crack. I see, Robin said. And you plan to make our trip more adventurous. Delta nodded emphatically. So we gotta find an island and see what they know. We gotta go information hunting. Alright. But what should our information hunting team name be called? Delta asked aloud, holding a hand to his chin. Robin didn't ask. He had a habit of saying things she didn't understand. Some were interesting and deserved more looking into, and some were, well, things like that. Info hunters? No, that's way too obvious. There have to be like a billion of those in the world. The searchers. But then how would anyone know what we were searching? Low down, hoedown. Ignore that. Coop the scoop. Knowledge thirst. For whatever reason, Delta kept on like that, forming increasingly obscure and irrelevant titles for an imaginary organization, all while she sailed onward, hoping to find an island soon. Maybe that would get him interested enough to stop. Where was Terry to deal with this? Normally, the mustache man was enough to keep Delta's attention, but he was nowhere to be found. She sighed. Right. He was forced below deck by Delta, a temporary punishment brought on when at the last island they stopped, he ordered a drink at some bar. That drink turned into 2, into 3, and well, Robin was there. The results were not pretty, night ending with Delta pulling Terry by his collar onto the ship while the drunkard shouted obscenities. Not even good obscenities, just whatever came to his mind. Needless to say, Delta was justifiably upset. But at this moment, Robin really wished the timeout would end already. How such a stupid person could get so powerful was beyond her. At the same time, the stupidity was at times slightly adorable, not that she would admit it. Ever. And even though Delta was older than her, he at times felt like a stupid kid brother with an alarmingly chiseled face. She didn't know how to feel about the caption, and that was hard to deal with. Information Gathering Council. Too long. Needs to roll off the tongue. Organization for the search of finding. Wait, that's even longer. And other times, his stupidity really was just stupid. 000. Delta unbolted the door to Terry's quote-unquote prison cell. It was for his own good. The only drunkard pirate captains Delta had ever met were complete and utter garbage, the crew of Rock Lee the pirate or Blackbeard. So in the case of the latter, even less than utter garbage. Maybe that was why Delta hated Terry's drinking so much. But he hadn't thought even a smidge about Teach 4 had to be years, at least. Maybe it was subconscious. Oh God, Blackbeard was alive again. Now that was a hard pill to swallow. He hadn't thought about it, but damn it. He shook his head a little. No time to think about that at the moment. He rapped the door a couple times before opening it. Terry, your punishment is over. Come on out, we're on an island. We need money again. Terry asked from somewhere. No sign of movement. Our last stop was when right. And it hasn't been. Silence descended upon the lower deck. How long has it been? Is this a relativity thing? Has it been years for you and days for me? Shit, what year is it? He yelled that last part, and the sound of scrambling and bumping boxes echoed through. Harry burst out of the shade, head and facial hair worn and disheveled, looking like he was about to have a heart attack. His eyes took in Delta's form. His breathing evened out. Okay, you look not old. That's good. Phew. Exhaled a harsh laugh. Don't scare me like that again, Delty. Please. Delty? We're at an island. Come on. Delta turned on his heel, disliking the thought of stepping into whatever rabbit hole Terry had found himself in. Right, yeah. Island. Love those. Delta jumped off the side of the ship with a whoop, handily sticking the landing. Robin and Terry walked off the boarding ramp like normal boring people. Delta looked around at the dock. Town looked quiet enough. Marine presence was small enough that they could dock right in front without a care in the world. And besides them and a few other fishing and merchant ships, the dock was mostly empty, except for. I've seen that ship, Delta muttered. Don't know where or how, but I have. That was happening more and more often. Vague familiarities that were barely there on the tip of his tongue, but similarly so far away. With time progressing as it was, he figured it was going to get more common. Delty. What did you say? Terry asked, sidling up beside him. Oh, nothing really. Just thinking. About what, Captain? Robin asked, coming up on the other side. What is this, an interrogation? Delta said, suddenly annoyed. Hey, calm down. No need to be testy. Terry pointed at the ship. Looked like you were staring at that boat over there. Mean something to you? No, nothing. Harry's eyes narrowed slightly, and he turned to get a better view of the vessel. Thing looks a little dumpy to me. Hasn't been cleaned for ages. He looked over at Robin. You'd think that the ocean would do the cleaning for you, being water and all, but no. Without proper care, a ship could easily turn into that. He pointed back at the ship. Robin smiled. Thank you for the information, Terry-san. Yeah, no problem. Hot calling the kettle black, I think, Delta interjected. Harry frowned. What? No. He took in the side of their ship. His lips pursed. No. His head hung. We're terrible pirates. Correction, Delta said. You're a terrible pirate. What? Why only me? He pointed an accusing finger. You and Nico Robin are on the ship as often. Delta shook his head. Not the same. Robin and I already have responsibilities. I, being captain, need to do my captain duties, and Robin, being navigator, needs to navigate. Harry's mouth dropped. But you barely do anything. We don't need a captain when there's only 3 people. Every ship needs a captain. And I'm always captain of my ships. Harry's outrage was not quelled. Are you seriously saying I do nothing? I can't believe this. I cook. He had a point. Terry did cook. Delta pursed his lips. Huh. He got you, Captain, Robin said, smiling. And it was real. He loved the real ones. Yeah, I know. Delta sighed. Gotta admit, I did put up a good fight. But you did. Harry's eyes were wide. His arm lifted to his head, fingers curling into his locks. Where am I? What is happening? When did you all go to Crazy Town? Gah. He started walking away, towards the point of contention, the ship. Should we go get him, apologize maybe? I have nothing to apologize for, Robin said. Silence is compliance, Robin. You know that. Which makes you an accomplice. She was quiet. Now it seems you've gotten me. Harry continued storming down the dock, not slowing down his stomping in the slightest. And then 5 people in brightly colored outfits stormed out from behind some building, grabbed him, and threw him onto the beat-up ship that was still seated at the top of his tonsils. The 5 people then climbed on board and ducked down below the ship's risking, out of sight. A few seconds later, Terry was thrown back off the ship and onto the dock, tied up in a neat little bow. Like an old-timey woman on the train tracks. The 5 people jumped back off the ship and surrounded Terry, then looked at Delta and Robin. Even far away, he could make out that they had all grinned maniacally. Bright outfits, the ship, even worn, looked to have remnants of a bright purple and orange so familiar. That was unexpected, Delta said. Completely. Should we go beat them up? Obviously, but Robin trailed off. Delta snickered, hiding his smile with a hand. It's pretty funny, right? Robin couldn't hold off a faint grin at Terry's state. They had to have bound his mouth. It was the only way he would stay so quiet about this. And besides the tying up, it doesn't look like they're really hurting him, Delta reasoned. If we went to search out some info, he'd forgive us, right? So cruel, Captain. He put his hands on his side. Yeah, you're right. Let's go get him. Hey, these guys are probably known criminals, maybe they know where the nearest military base is. Genius. Delta and Robin started walking toward the men and Terry. It looks like they have a theme, he said under further inspection. It seems almost like no way. Out from the spot where the 5 men had first popped came that unforgettable mug. The captain. Light teal pants, red striped shirt, orange hat, orange cloak, and last but not least, a big red nose it could only be. He stopped in between them and Terry, arms hidden within the draping cape. It is too late to run, weaklings. All you can do now is tremble before me, the feared Boogie the Clown. No way. So familiar. But bright had been the wrong word. He meant to say flashy. Buggy grinned, ruby red lips shining in the sunlight. I see you've heard of me, little one, he boasted. I can tell by that look in your eye. That look of fear. And that was enough to break Delta from his reverie. Little one. I think we're like, very similar ages. Ah. Buggy waved his hand dismissively. Keep quiet, little runt, or we'll kill your friend. Delta paused. Threatening crewmates, even if it was Terry, was never okay. Buggy was on thin ice. Again. The perpetual clown completely misinterpreted Delta's action. Yes, you don't want him to be hurt, do you? Buggy laughed. It sounded awful. Maybe I can propose a trade. Why trade? Robin asked. None of your goons are very close to our crew member. With how out of shape you all look, I believe that I could get to him before any of you. The guys behind Buggy glared daggers at her, mean scowls plastered on their faces. Buggy's face looked even worse. He seemed just about ready to blow a gasket. You dare insult the feared Buggy pirates. We are feared throughout the seas, woman. I have a 5 million beery bounty. What was with weak pirates and flaunting their bounties to the world? It was a little sad. He growled, shaking in rage. Robin watched on passively. And suddenly, Buggy's entire countenance changed. His grin was malicious, eyes gleaming with superiority once more. Boys, go back to the ship. You're not needed. Robin raised an eyebrow. Right, she didn't know Buggy. This was a first time meet and greet for those two. Still glaring, the 5 followed orders and got back on board. From there, they continued to watch how it would go down. You're mistaken, woman. You believe that I've kept my distance, that death dose is not mere centimeters away from your friend. Ha. Wrong. He leaned to the side and gripped the orange cope, wildly throwing it to the side. Flashy reveal. His arms were pointed forward. One hand was there and the other was not. Instead of a hand was a flat piece of skin on his wrist. Robin raised an eyebrow. Buggy's grin stayed strong. You do not yet understand the danger you've fallen into, I see. Well beware, for I, Buggy the Clown, have eaten the chop fruit. With it, I can remove and reposition any and every part of me with ease. His crew was cheering. You may believe I'm missing a hand, but that is wrong. So wrong, you fools. No, my hand, holding a knife, has been simply detached from my arm and now resides right by your friend's neck. He is moments from death. Delta rolled his eyes. Robin looked vaguely confused by Buggy's actions. He still hadn't even revealed why he'd done this in the first place. And frankly, the answer was probably to exchange him for Beery, but Delta didn't really care at the moment. Buggy was becoming obnoxious. So he moved. You mean this hand? Delta asked from behind Buggy, grasping the wildly flapping hand in his fingers. The knife lay abandoned on the ground. Terry looked extremely pissed. Of course he meant that hand. Delta didn't even wait for Buggy to realize what had happened and turn around, he snapped up beside the clown and kicked him in the gut. Buggy smashed through a stone wall. Oops. Delta did not mean to kick that hard. He dropped the now limp hand and started to untie Terry. Whatever. Not like the kick killed him or anything. It took longer than he wanted to admit to get Terry's bondage undone. Whatever their faults, those 5 goons were quite the talented knotters. Speaking of the goons, when he turned around, all of them were frozen in place on board the ship, Robin's arms covering each of them, holding them taut. Each and every one had real fear in their eyes, along with a hint of disbelief. Yes, Delta handed it to himself, they were a bit above any level these people had ever seen in their lives. For all they knew, Buggy's devil fruit may as well have been the strongest one of all. Delta cracked his knuckles and smirked. The men collectively shuddered. So, I'm looking for a big military base. Something big enough for a large prison. Got any ideas where I could find a place like this? The men were silent, frozen in terror. Delta slowly straightened his shoulders, eyes darkening. Well. And that was all the interrogation they needed. 000. The island trip had been a glowing success, all things considered. They couldn't have been on the island for more than 20 minutes, they hadn't needed to suspiciously ask random people in the streets, and Robin had learned a little more about her oddball captain. He could be scary if necessary. Still, looking at him splayed limply on the deck beside Terry, it was hard to equate him to anything other than silly. in a good way. The nearest large marine base, or the nearest one those goons could accurately direct to, was closer than she'd expected, a day away, max. As to why she was sailing toward a marine base, disregarding every single one of her survivalist instincts, she didn't know. Delta was playing his cards very close to his chest. Robin just hoped he at least had cards to hold. If they walked into a marine base without any plan whatsoever, she was not going to forgive him. Even if she really enjoyed his presence. You could have been faster, you know, Terry said down below as he stared up at the slowly darkening sky. You already told me, Delta responded. And I already said I was sorry. Doesn't automatically make it alright, though. Sorries can't always fix mistakes. HMPH. A lopsided smirk crawled onto Delta's face. Ain't it the truth? Stop trying to sound like an old wise man. It doesn't work. I'll hit you. Harry pulled himself into a sitting position. Twisting around, he called to Robin, hey Nick or O'Bane, come on down. You can lay on the deck too. It'll be a fucking party. That sounded more tempting than she wanted to admit. Side note. There was something odd about this ship and the number of admissions she wanted hidden away. Delta yawned. Down be dumb, Terry. Robin doesn't do stuff like that. She's too cultured and stuff. You ever asked? Terry asked. Delta was quiet for a moment, as if thinking hard about that question. Robin so desired to know what was happening within his mind. Finally, he answered. I think so. Pretty sure. Harry was dismissive. Well, I haven't heard it, so. Anyway, Robane, would I say? Feel like busting a groove on the ground. He twisted his shoulders a bit for emphasis. Sure. She said sure. Why has she done that? It was so unlike her. The wind was calm, though, so it'd be fine. Against any rational thought, Robin felt herself stand up and walk down to the main deck. She awkwardly stopped in front of the two boys. What was she supposed to do now? Harry recognized her struggle. You just gotta lay down. Not hard, really. Doesn't really matter where you go, but I'd suggest keeping your untouchables away from Captain Delty. He's a bit of a perv, you see. Robin smiled while Delta yelled out in defense. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the ground beside them. The wood was warmer than she was expecting, and coupled with the heat of the setting sun, it really wasn't all that bad. The sky was beautiful. She couldn't remember the last time she'd enjoyed it like this. Maybe it never happened. I told you she'd participate, Terry said with an air of superiority. Only have to ask. Robin didn't know what to do with her arms as they laid limply at her sides. She didn't really care. Delta woke up the next morning, grinned, and whipped himself out of the hammock and onto the wooden deck. He stomped a couple of times, flipped into a handstand, and kicked himself forward, out the door, onto the deck. Robin was already out there, relaxed on the upper level over by the steering wheel, a loose East Blue map in her hand. But she was looking at him, or rather, the commotion which had just disturbed her otherwise silent day. Of course, there were always the waves, but, well, there were always the waves. They disappear, like the hum of an air conditioning unit. Good morning, Robin. Delta whooped, thrusting his hands in the air. Good morning, Captain, she called, smiling. How are you today? She was puzzled. It was clear from her tone. I'm excited. Delta began to jog up the stairs, towards Robin. Yes, I see that, Captain. Well, aren't you? Delta, now right beside her, thrust his hands out in her direction. She did the mostly fake smile of confusion at him, but right now, Delta was okay with that. Okay, I see that you're not. That's okay, don't worry. I'm not mad, just disappointed. I think you're just not seeing all the plans we have in store the way I do. That is possible, Captain. She didn't have any plans in store. She wondered if maybe he was talking about his march on the marine base. That couldn't be good. Well, that's also okay, Robin. I am here to fix that. It'll be great. It'll be great. Below deck, the pair heard a quiet bumbling. They both imagined that Terry was awake, probably due to Delta's earlier animation. They were both right, much to the chagrin of Terry, who was beginning to be known for enjoying his beauty sleep. The couple small creaks, some squeaks, footsteps, the little crack of that one stair that was surely gonna break anytime now if Terry didn't quit stepping on it like he always did, and then Delta and Robin watched the deck door down to the galley open. Lo and behold, Terry followed. He was frowning. There were gray bags under his eyes. Delta? He shouted. I am up to here, he motioned the point to which he was up, with your goddamn bullcrap. Who do you think we are, yelling this early in the morning? Hooligans. Pirates, maybe, Robin commented. Harry pointed at her. Don't you dare encourage him. Delta, I don't think you understand the gravity of what you are putting me through. There is no alcohol on this ship. I drink all the time. I use it to sleep. It has been very difficult for me. Do you see that? Okay, Terry, okay, Delta said. I won't do it again. Now come up here. I'm about to tell Robin about our cool plans. What are you talking about? Terry asked, currently sated. Come on. Faster. When Terry was up, Delta continued. I'm talking about our grand storming of that military base. So Robin was right. She thought again that this couldn't be good. Oh, Terry said, and then, oh what the fucking hell, Delta. Language, Terry. Language. Bro Bane, hey, you cannot be cool with this, right? Robin said, I think we should let the captain finish his thought. See? Delta said. Robin is willing to listen. Maybe you should learn some patience, young grasshopper. Terry stuck his tongue out. Delta did too. It was all good fun. So now that the games are over, Delta continued, let's get on with the show. See, I forgot my original plan almost immediately, but I've promised military base shenanigans, so I feel I must deliver. Therefore, I plan to sneak in, take all the prisoners with any sort of bounty on their heads, and then ransom them back to the base. But it gets even better. While I'm doing that, you guys are gonna sneak into the office of whoever runs that place, beat him up, and then give orders to his underlings by disguising yourselves as that guy. Your orders will be, of course, to follow my every command, and you'll have them give me a bunch of money. Then we get out of there. It'll be awesome. There was a beat of silence. We could also just steal their money directly. Robin said. Another beat. But where would be the fun in that? Plus, isn't stealing kind of bad? I think it would be a good time, Captain. Don't you, Terry-san? Harry looked up from the floorboards he'd been staring down at. What? Oh, yeah, definitely. No, seriously, I bet that'll all be great. I think he's being sarcastic, Delta said. You're seeing things, Captain, Robin said. I don't know, Robin, Terry's not usually into all this. It seems very out of character for him. I think you're reading too much into this. Delta nodded. Okay, I can accept that. 000. They sailed for the rest of the day without much to speak about. Terry did some fishing, he was getting much better at it and caught a couple larger ones with Delta's strength for help. Whenever they were doing that, Delta always wanted to just scoop the big guy out with his gum arm, but he really wanted to keep that stuff hidden from these two, at least for now. What with the younger monkey D. Luffy strolling around out there, it was best for most people to stay uninformed about there being two gum fruit eaters. Robin spent most of the day reading. They reached land by nightfall, but the base wasn't anywhere in sight, so they dropped anchor and settled in for the night. Terry made dinner and it was all good fun. They all went to bed in utter peace. But then the next morning came, or rather, sunrise, if that can even be called morning, and the three shipgoers were all simultaneously alerted to a nearby presence on the waters as the sound of a blaring alarm drummed across the waves. Robin was the first one to get a look at the looming blue ship with a flower petal eye on the mast. Since she was alone, she allowed herself to shiver. It was a battleship, plain and simple, and it was right on top of them. How could she escape? They were too far from shore to jump, and even if they weren't, she'd certainly be spotted. Therefore, it was obvious that she had to stay below deck. She silently cursed, and her lip quivered. This was a bad situation, and it was all Delta's fault. They were right off the coast of an actual marine base. What was he thinking? No, what was she thinking? She followed him here, did she not? On this stupid, rotting vessel with these two stupid, incompetent, godforsaken pirates. She'd never forgive herself if she was caught. She'd never forgive Delta, that utter fool, if she was caught. She had to stay below deck. They had no reason to come on board, not that she knew. Maybe because the ship wasn't licensed to be there. But who cared? If anyone, certainly not someone in charge of a battleship. But that asked the question of why there would be a battleship on this island in the first place, not that Robin had any particular answer in mind. Okay, I'm calm, she thought to herself. She took 2 deep breaths. This was no time to panic. All was quiet and the battleship wasn't getting any closer. She'd be alright. She was okay in a fight, at least good enough to get away or talk her way out. She was good at that. She was practice-ready. Everything was alright. She heard stomping up on the deck and her heart was pounding again. Her devil fruit eye looked down and she created a matching ear beside it. Delta had gotten up and he looked frustrated and not a little nervous. Well, that wasn't good. This was certainly the first time that she'd seen Delta look nervous or even slightly uncomfortable. He was supposed to be the strongest guy around. That damn man. She felt used and cheap. She would be okay. They couldn't know she was on board, could they? She hadn't gotten any real information on the military's knowledge of her whereabouts recently. Maybe they knew Delta had taken her. But why would they care about Delta? He wasn't wanted and this was a battleship. Oh no, Delta was squatting. He jumped and he was gone. There was a knock on Robin's door. She barely stopped from squeaking. Her nerves were on high alert. She was silent. Some more knocking. Robin, you awake in there? It was Terry's voice. Robin eased up. Yes, Terry-san. Come in. The door opened. Well, good morning, if you can even call it that. What time is it? The sun is just rising. Oh god. Anyway, did you hear that huge noise a second ago? Scared the bejesus out of me. That's why I'm awake, Terry-san. Yeah, me too. Heh. What do you think it was? I haven't been on deck yet. I'm actually a little nervous, but I heard Delta up there for a moment. You think he's dealing with it? I hope so. She paused. There is a marine battleship not a quarter mile from us at this moment. Harry's eyes widened. What? Why? We're not wanted, are we? What would my ma say? No offense. His eyes widened some more. He pointed at her. You don't think they're coming for you, do you? How would they know you were here? I don't know what the military knows, but I do know that we're currently next to a military base, which does not help matters. Harry shook his head wildly. No, it does not. But don't worry, Nico Robin, I'll protect you. He grinned a little at the absurdity of his statement. Robin smiled back. Thank you, Terry-san. I'll be sure to keep that in mind. So the pair sat in silence for a couple minutes and no loud noises or any other warning signs showed up. Robin had seen that the battleship hadn't moved an inch either, but Delta was nowhere to be seen. It was a bit frustrating for her how fast that man moved when he wanted to. Hey, you want some breakfast? Terry asked. I realized I can get to the kitchen without going up on the deck and I don't think either of us are going back to sleep anytime soon. Robin said a polite affirmative and Terry gave her a thumbs up. He made his way to the kitchen and Robin was once again alone in her room. Then her negative thoughts started bubbling again and she made the executive decision to sit with Terry while he cooked. He made them eggs and some toast. Too early to be fancy, he told Robin when she saw what he had planned for them. She didn't tell him that stress historically decreased her appetite. They'd been sitting there in the kitchen for another 20 or so minutes when a loud thump rattled the deck. Luffy's back. Robin muttered, mostly to herself. I sure hope so, Terry responded. Robin felt that Terry made a fair point, so she created another eye on the mast to make sure that it really was Delta. It was, and he didn't look any worse for wear. So she waited and watched him stomp to the door down into their galley. Some creaking steps later, and Delta was right in front of them, staring down at their breakfast. He looked up at Terry, and his mouth was half open in a frown. Breakfast? He whined. Without me? Oh, get out of here. Where were you? Terry asked. Me? Delta pointed at himself. I was on that battleship over there. He paused. You did know there was a battleship over there, right? It made that huge sound earlier. Yeah, we knew, Terry said. Robin used her creepy eyes to check out the scene. We were all incognito about it. Weren't we, Robin? Give me some knuckles. He offered her some knuckles. She stared at him and didn't take the knuckles. Okay. No knuckles today, Terry said, and he slid his knuckle-infused arm away from her. Still, it was pretty badass of us. We were ready for danger. Why is that marine battleship here, Captain? Robin asked, stoically. Oh, yeah. Well, kind of a long story. Okay, not a long story, but kinda weird. There's a vice admiral on that ship and he's, well, kinda, my friend. And he happened to be on this island and felt my presence, I know, creepy, and he wanted to play a joke on me. Of course, I immediately knew it was him, so I counter-snuck up on him and, well, it was a good time. I punched a marine, I took his clothes. It was great. You should have been there. Well, maybe not Robin. Maybe not Robin, oh god. He eyed the young woman with something approaching nausea. Robin, are you okay? I didn't even think about what this must have been like for you. Or of course I would have explained it to you right away. Before I even got on the ship. If anything, Robin's face was stranger than Delta's, at least proportionally. She had this calm and manic look in her eye as she watched Delta sink lower and lower to the ground, freaking out and apologizing for her bad time. For the life of her, she could not figure out what was happening. He was a pirate and he was using her and he was good friends with a vice admiral and he had kids and he was blatantly apologizing and he was one of the strongest things she'd ever seen and it was too much. Much too much for Nico Robin, who was used to rapists and thieves and the all-powerful world government on her tail. She stood up, turned around and left the room. Delta and Terry heard her door thud shut. Nico Robin is mad. Terry laughed. What the hell? Do you think she's upset with me? Delta asked. How should I know? But I do know that Nico Robin is mad. I have never seen her mad. I should apologize. That sobered Terry up. What? No, you should not. Why? She's mad. You were just apologizing over and over. That was probably what made her mad. What? That's silly. Harry bit into his eggs. That's women for you. Okay. Then I'll let her be. No. You don't get it at all. You need to go to her and talk to her. But you said I shouldn't apologize. And you shouldn't. You need to talk to her. But Robin doesn't talk. That's where you're wrong. She's a woman. Women talk. If you recall, this is what you did when we got Robin to lay on the deck with us. She can surprise you. Fine. But if this fails, I'm blaming it on you. That is okay with me. I cook here. And that's how Delta came face to face with the dreaded door to Robin's room. He knocked once and then a couple more for good measure. Robin. Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. You don't sound fine. Can I come in? He took 2 whole breaths in waiting. Yes, of course. Delta gently opened the door. Robin was there, sitting on the loose chair they'd found and left in this cabin. She was pointed at him, looking at him. Hi, Delta said. Hello. Are you alright? Yes. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Wait. No, I'm not sorry. You're not sorry? No. Of course I am. I'm very sorry. Alright. It seems like you don't believe me, but it's true. I wanted to apologize when I got here, but Terry told me not to do that anymore, so then when I did, I got all nervous, and here we are. That makes sense. Delta blew a frustrated puff of air from his nose. Robin, what's wrong? Nothing. Robin. As captain of this vessel, I order you to tell me what is wrong. No more messing around. Robin stared at him. She stopped. Go on. I don't want to. Well, as your captain, I order you to. She looked down. I was uncomfortable about the battleship. Delta nodded and took a step forward. Robin looked back up at him. I was angry with you, Captain, for bringing us here. I'm not angry anymore. What are you then? I'm nothing. You're not nothing. That's silly. Then I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with the situation. You're not mad at me? No, Captain. I'm not mad at you. Delta smiled, and Robin realized that for all the smiling this man did, it was usually out of silliness. This smile was less clear, but in a way, more genuine. That's good. I was so worried that you were never gonna forgive, and that would have been terrible. You're part of my crew. He continued, but now, we've got to ask, what are we gonna do about that battleship? Garp woke us up way too early in the morning, and Terry needs his beauty rest. That is the end, so, thanks for watching. Comment down below with recommendations on what fanfic I should do next. And remember to like and subscribe to my channel.